Welcome back to another edition of Chromatic Elephant, the COVID-19 edition, video edition that is. My name is Tyler Reitzner.
And I am Resmaa Menakem. Peace, peace.
We are here today to record yet another episode of bringing the racialized elephant in the room and the elephant of somatic abolitionism. And it's good to see you, my friend. Good to see you healthy and doing well.
Yeah, it's good. I'm learning some good stuff, man. As we move through this, I'm learning. I'm getting confronted with some of my own limitations. People are telling me that I'm quite the asshole that I didn't think I was. So I'm trying to learn how to get better.
Well, it's funny because I think when you like doing the stuff we do, like when we go out, and you do it obviously on a bigger scale, but when you go out and you do workshops and you're working with people and you're presenting things, people come and I don't know if this happens to you, I shouldn't, but for me, they'll come to me almost as if I have some secret sauce about all
That's
this.
right. That's right. Yeah.
Like you're, and almost like I'm a guru, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Their words, not mine. And
Yeah.
it's amazing to me because I literally, and you've seen me present, like I talk about how much I'm struggling and how I struggle and how I've overcome and still struggle and what the next layer is. And it's just like, I'm just a dude struggling with, like you said, being an asshole, trying not to be an asshole. Right.
That's exactly right.
I don't want to be an asshole, but my defenses and my defaults and my trauma history, quite frankly, being an asshole is a way to protect myself.
Exactly right.
And so I don't want to do it, and I'm trying and struggling to not be an asshole. That could actually be the name of a show.
That's right.
That could be the same. We're not trying to be assholes.
That's
doing
right.
the best we can.
We're just doing the best we can right now. Exactly.
A couple of assholes trying not to be assholes, but and with that, like that's. I think for me, one of the things that COVID-19 is really is showing me is that I do have a capacity to be an asshole, especially when it comes to not seeing certain things that I don't want to see and really kind of pushing away from them. And one of the things I think is interesting about COVID is I'm hearing a lot of people, and I'm trying not to be an asshole right now when I'm saying this, but I've heard a lot of people who are saying that COVID is causing causing things, and by that I mean like for instance, COVID is causing deaths in the African American community at a much larger rate than other communities. That's not COVID.
That's right.
COVID-19 isn't causing those deaths. COVID-19 is the latest symptom of structural issues, and other people call it privilege, but actually I would, you coined the phrase advantages, and I'm going with that because that makes I can relate to that the advantages that a white person has, and then you add layers to those advantages, right? Like economically, geographically, like there's all these different advantages that are really getting highlighted right now. And there's also being highlighted a level of stupid that I didn't know existed in this country, where we just do not want to hear we don't want to hear science, we don't want to hear reality.
That's right.
And I know we've got other yes, there's climate change, there's other things that have highlighted this, but I think watching what's going on, the longer we are in stay-at-home status, it's, to me, it's not COVID-19 causing the unrest. It's not COVID-19 causing these deaths. It's our structural issues that were in place already that have caused this stuff to happen.
Right.
The COVID is just the mechanism by which it's happening. Does that make sense? Am I making
It makes a
sense
lot of
here?
sense. It makes a
Okay.
lot of sense. So here's the way I look at it. COVID-19 is the latest bullet, and racism is the gun. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Racism and racialization is the gun that's always been put to the head of bodies of culture in general, and Black bodies specifically, right? And so, for instance, right now we're wading into it is an advantage to be white, and anybody that tells you any difference is just straight up lying,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, it is it being in a society that's predicated on the white body being the supreme standard by which all bodies humanity shall be measured. You can't tell me it's not an advantage to be white in a system that's predicated on that, right?
Uh,
And so
yeah,
for
I mean,
instance,
I would say, sorry, but I would say that the the way the demographics play out in the death toll, it's
yeah,
pretty obvious.
it's pretty obvious. So
Okay.
one of the things that's happening now is that you have all of these frontline people doing all of this work, right? Bagging groceries, nurses, doing all. I mean, um, bus drivers, train, all of these cleaning up garbage, all of this stuff. You have all of these frontline people. The same thing, though. The other thing that's happened in parallel to that is um, you also have a tremendous amount of cities and states that are going into the hole financially,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's not a whole lot of income coming in because people are off work, because all of this different type of stuff. But you have a section of people who have for years had stagnant wages, for years could not afford childcare,
Mm-hmm.
for years could not afford a car, for years, I mean, 30 years, we have had our wages be stagnant, right? And white male billionaires have gotten richer and richer and richer and richer, right? Where many of us have gotten poorer and poorer and more bills, stagnant wages, inability to having our healthcare system tied to where we work as opposed to just having a healthcare system that's actually a healthcare system. And so right now we know once this COVID-19 stuff begins to assuage or begins to move away, right, to where it's not as visceral as it is right now. One of the things that we know is just going to happen is that, and this is the way that white body supremacy works, is that you're going to have cities all across the country start to begin to say, okay, we got to cut things
Mm-hmm.
in order to do something about this this shortfall in money, right?
Yeah.
Here's if you don't have a somatic abolitionist lens or equitable lens, the very people who have been on the front lines of this stuff dying are the very people that are going to get fired, because they're usually people of color and the people that are the last hired. They don't have seniority because we live in a system that's predicated on white people getting free land, getting FHA loans, having covenants, getting red lines. So they had getting pulled into sewer jobs, getting pulled into garbage jobs, getting pulled into those jobs, right?
Yep.
Because your daddy's uncles was working that job. So you have seniority, whereas I don't. So I'm the one that's on the front line. So the very people that are on the front lines doing these work after this COVID-19 happens, there is not going to be any equitable distribution in terms of looking at how do we restructure this thing so those people are not the masses of people that get fired. And we know, and this is how white body supremacy works, is that it is, if you don't say it into the room, then the status quo reigns supreme.
Mm-hmm.
And so right now, you're going to have all of these millions and millions and millions of shortfalls with all of these cities all across the country. And the first people that are going to be fired, the first police officer that's going to be fired, The first firefighter that's going to be fired, the first garbage people that are going to be fired are going to be bodies of culture, because it is interwoven into the very structure. And people will go, well, no, it's just about seniority. No, this is how racialization is built into it. And so that's when I talk about white advantage, that's what I mean.
Mm-hmm. It's yeah. That's why it goes like to me. It goes beyond privilege.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not just this. There's a literal advantage that needs to be addressed.
Exactly.
Um,
And let me say this, and not an earned advantage, right?
mhm.
It's not attributable to your talent.
It's manifest
It,
destiny, right?
it's manifest
We're,
destiny. It is what it is because it is ordained unto me because I deserve
yes,
it.
and that's why. And I think even though we don't, and as white people, and I'll even saying that it's like, ugh, like when you say that, I'm like, wait a minute, you mean I'm not? Like what? And I know it intellectually, but
That's
it's
exactly.
so ingrained in
That's it.
us from a
That's it.
structural standpoint. To your
That's it.
question, like I expect it,
That's exactly right.
and when it's
Yeah.
not there, something feels really wrong.
That's it.
Even
Somebody's
though
taking
some
somebody's taking something from me. And
somebody's taking
right.
something from me, even though they're not,
That's right.
my
And
situation hasn't changed.
and let me say this. If we are really going to do a restructuring of white body supremacy and how all this, white people are going to lose something. This win-win bullshit
Mhm.
is out the door. There is no win-win. Billionaires have gotten filthy rich, filthy rich off of the backs of poor people. Filthy, right? Off of the backs of poor, or off of the backs of black people and indigenous people and Latino people have gotten filthy rich, right?
Mhm.
They get bailed out and get socialized bailouts every time they get into trouble, right? And we run around here thinking that $1,200 in our bank account is something. And freaking Bezos makes $8 million an hour or something crazy, right? This is what I'm talking about. If we're going to restructure this thing, we're going to have to restructure this thing in an equitable way that takes into account and centralizes the impact of race on capitalism and racialization on capitalism, the impact of racialization on government, the impact of racialization on schooling, the impact of racialization, right? Central to the
Mhm.
question, not an addendum to the question. And most progressives want to talk about racism and racialization and white body supremacy as an addendum to the discussion, not as central to the discussion.
Yeah, well, I think that just speaks to the fact that they don't they know that there's the contingent of white folks who don't feel advantaged.
Right.
And so
That's right.
therefore when they hear that, they're like, "Wait a minute. What about
What,
me?"
what about me? Exactly. So let me say something about that. I was at I did a speech about a year ago, and one of the things that happens when I used to do speeches that people will come up to me, especially white folks primarily, would come up to me and credential themselves to me, right?
Mhm.
So I did this and I was this, and usually it falls along the lines of identity, right?
Yep.
Identity, nationality, gender, something like that, to credential themselves and set themselves apart from other white people, right? That happened. If I tell you all of the times that people came up to me to set themselves apart from other white people, there would be no white people left. I mean, I mean, if I took every identity that white people said, yeah, but I am this. If I said, okay, you're excused. Okay, if I did that, there would be no white people standing in front of me,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that this particular white person said was that she comes up to me and she goes, I've been reading your book and just think it's an amazing book. And da 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 da. And I'm listening, and I'm like, and I'm always waiting for the next shoot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes, how do you like? I'm struggling a bit, Resmaa.
Yes.
And I said, okay. And she said, so I was raised in a family that was very, very poor. We couldn't do this and we couldn't do that, and we used to have to wear the same shoes, and I used to have to, share, just every. She came up with this story, and no doubt that the story was probably true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And she said, so, I don't, and I was able to kind of do things and da 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 da. And so I just, I'm having a struggle with that. And this is during the time where I was actually answering questions when white folks would come up to me. I don't do that anymore. I don't answer questions anymore. So when she got done, I said, can I ask you a question? She said, yeah. I said, were there poor black people where you were born and raised? And she said, um, there were a few. I said, so where you were born and raised, there was, I mean, to hear your voice go, there were a few like that, means that there weren't many. So
There
you
were
lived in,
there were none. I'm
there were
gonna
none.
let
That's
you
right.
in.
That's right.
That's white
That's
people
right.
speak for. Yeah,
That's
there
right.
were none. I can't think
That's
of
right.
any, but there must have been. And
That's
it's
right.
not like that's gonna definitely. You know what I mean? Like I can't think of any, but of course there had to have been.
That's right. That's right. And that's what I said to her. I said, I want to just leave. I want to leave you with a couple things. I said, notice that you actually could live in a place where you were poor and still be insulated away from bodies of culture.
Mm-hmm.
I said, just want you to think on that for a second. I said, the second thing I want to say is, I said, just imagine that there were a lot of Black poor people where you were at. I said, the identity of being poor does not usurp the structural apparatus of racialization. I said, so do you believe that the poor Black people or the poor Latino people or the poor indigenous people fared the same way that you fared as a poor white person? And she looked at me and she goes, well, I said, I'm not asking what you think. I want you to hold that for a minute. Hold it. Your identity does not usurp racialization. These poor people, those poor Black people, I'm saying poor Black people, and then you're saying poor white people. These poor Black people have a subjective, different experience with it, living in a society that's predicated on white body supremacy, the supremacy of the white body, than you do as a poor white person. I am not saying that you don't have any difficulties in life, but race makes your life easier.
Mm-hmm.
Being your advantage by being a poor white person compared to being a poor Black person. I'm not saying you don't have hardships. I'm saying you are advantaged with your hardship. The racialization gives you advantages with that same hardship compared to an indigenous, a Black or Latino body. That's what I'm saying.
And it's funny because I think, and I also want to include Asian folks as we're
Exactly
watching
right.
the
Exactly right.
COVID process
Exactly right.
unfold.
But let me just say one quick thing about that.
Yep.
So the racialization piece with that, this is why people have to develop and understand this from a racialization lens, right? Is that the idea of Asians being quote unquote model minorities, right? The underbelly of that is the yellow peril. And that's what a lot of Asian people are experiencing right now, is the fact that this society, that there is a racial hierarchy, and white folks get to determine who's on that racial hierarchy. And so if you're a model minority, the underbelly of that is and has always been yellow peril. And now some some people of Asian descent are starting to see the yellow peril piece of this structural apparatus, racialized apparatus, rear its head, right? It's always been there.
Yeah.
Right? The same way that anti-blackness has always been there. The same way that indigenous invisibility has always been there. But now, because of this rabbit ass dog freak of a president we got, right? Now him running around talking about Chinese flu, right? Gives all of these other rabbit ass dogs carte blanche to spit in people of Asian descent's face and go off and do all that stuff. And then you have the horizontal violence that has been with a lot of our communities that is also has a racialization component to it. You have immigrants, Asian immigrants that have come over here, and then they get shuttled into to areas where you had an underclass of Black folks or underclass of other communities, and then those are pitted together, and then the white racialization hand in terms of redlining and all that stuff gets removed, and then so then when Black and Chinese or Black and Korean or Black and indigenous, when we go at each other, that horizontal wounding obscures the violence, the vertical violence that white folks have created through this racialization pieces. And so this stuff, man, this why I keep saying this stuff is so ubiquitous that if you don't develop a lens and put on a lens by what you're seeing this through, it will operate as the air, as if it's just is.
I think the biggest examples to me of white advantage comes up actually from watching successful people of color, because, and I should probably quote what successful is.
That's right.
Because it's not about the blatant racism as much as it is about the just lack of grace.
Yeah. Oh, like
there's
that.
there's no grace. Like,
None.
I look at what white men are able to get away with in corporate America, for instance, as opposed to what a Black woman can get away with.
That's right.
And it's totally different. And even like the most, like, I know for a long time people looked at becoming a Black president was some sort of sign or pinnacle.
Yeah, post-racial.
Post-racial, but also like this pinnacle, like, if we can do that.
Yeah,
we will. And now I think after watching what happened to Obama had zero grace.
That's right. None.
He couldn't wear a freaking tan suit without
for 8 years.
The world freaking out for 8 years. And then you look at what Trump can do. He's got grace coming out the yin.
Goodness.
And it's like, yeah, this is what we're talking about. Like, this is what I'm talking about. So to me, it's the advantage of white supremacy is actually more stark and wide open in looking at successful bodies of color or bodies of culture, as you point out. Mm-hmm. The more successful they get, actually, the less grace they have to make mistakes. And once they make one mistake, man, look out.
That's it. I mean, look, let me put it to you use a different analogy. Check this out. Tim Tebow's ass for years kneeled on the football field. Yep. Kneeled on the football field. All of these dudes would get in the middle of the damn field and kneel, right? And then you got Colin Kaepernick, who is quietly kneeling. He ain't saying, he's kneeling, and the way in which the NFL came at him and didn't have his back. The way at which Fox News and everybody else and progressives and everybody came at this man simply for doing the same thing that people have been doing for years, right? And so for me, if you don't understand how racialization has the built-in quality of white advantage into it, then you will, it's really hard for me sometimes, Tyler, to talk to white people um, when when I get this when I notice right up front that they haven't done any work, any embodied work. It's hard for me. It's like when I start to begin to talk, I go, okay, I'm done. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's very quick. I'm get there now in order to protect myself from being wounded and racially wounded, right? I don't
Yeah.
allow myself to do that anymore. It's because I don't need to wade through all of the dreck that you're going to come up with that I done heard 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
And you think because you're saying it, because it's coming out of your lips, that it's something new.
Well, and not to mention, for white folks, being able to talk to Resmaa Menakem, author, um, uh, Black justice leader, like just even to be able to associate,
Yep.
I'm good.
Yeah.
That's all I need to do. Is
That's
if
it.
I can get Resmaa Menakem to talk to me,
Yeah.
oh, then I'm a woke white guy,
That's
right?
it.
Or a woke
And
white woman, and all
I,
of those things.
I'm so glad you said that, man, because that's one of the things that me and my team, especially my team, is actually doing better at now. And one of the things that they're doing better at now is shielding me from that bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're doing better at not allowing people just to have access to me in order to utilize. I can't tell you the number of people that have read my book and decided that they were going to create a workshop on my book
Mm-hmm.
without ever even talking to me, doing a workshop without developing anything with other white people. They just do it themselves, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you a number of people that will read my damn book and do a workshop and never mention white body supremacy.
Which is insane considering
Insane.
your book is about
It's
it's
insane.
about that. Well, and I'll tell you, because I have had to make myself very conscious of this, because I don't want to, because I recognize, um I don't want to inadvertently even do that in our relationship
Mm-hmm.
because of,
You've been very careful about that, and I
well,
appreciate that.
well, and but it's also like I have to be conscious of it. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
not something that I can um, just be carefree about,
Mm-hmm.
because what I've noticed is even in doing present, because I use your work a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
or I should say I promote it a lot because I
Mm-hmm.
believe in it, and I know how
Mm-hmm.
helpful it's been for me on multiple levels. And so I promote it and preach it a lot, but even that, it's like I got to give you credit and make sure I
Yep.
don't do too
Yep.
much to like position
Yep.
myself as, hey,
That's right.
I'm a woke dude you should listen to because
That's
I
it.
know Resmaa Menakem and I do a
That's it.
podcast with him. But that I know that's I watch it with, because we love to get one up.
That's it.
White folks
On
need
each
that
other.
on
On
each
each
other
other.
all the
Yep.
time.
Yep.
No, and so even like even as white people, so and I don't mean to diverge from the topic, but I just know like um that goes back, I guess, to even to the advantage part. What's really hard, white people, we, and it's, I know this isn't just white people, but that's the, for our audience, that's the work I'm doing right now, so that's what I'm going to frame this in it, because I know other people will, that's a traumatic response to get one up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um and for white people, that's one of our biggest go-to's, and we will
Mm-hmm.
do it in a room full of, when Black, indigenous, people of color aren't in a room, that's the first thing I start to notice is
That's right.
white people posturing. And I've told you, I
That's right.
it, I pick up on it right away, and I just want to leave the room, I want to
That's
walk
right.
out, and that's when you say stay.
Stay.
And I'm like, I don't want to stay, Resmaa,
Right.
but I'm going to
Right.
stay because you keep freaking telling me to stay.
Mm.
But that's like, that is a thing. And um that I think that's one of the things that COVID for me is really, like, I don't like to say that COVID is causing this stuff. What I like to point out is that it's like taking a blanket off and now we can see everything is exposed.
That's it.
And one of the biggest things I see exposed is the need for that white infrastructure to be one up on somebody.
Yep. Yep. And those pieces can't be gotten to if you don't develop a community and a cultural container to hold that stuff.
Yeah.
So good stuff.
Which is what we got to do now.
That's it.
Because we're done here for this episode of Chromatic Elephant. So hopefully what you folks who are listening will do is do your own work. Yeah. And I don't say that flippantly. I'm not a guy, as we already talked about, I'm not a guy coming in here who's woke. I'm just an asshole trying not to be an asshole. So you should hopefully do the same things so we can stop trying to get one up on each other and realize, like, hey, we're all in this together. Actually, we need each other, and we need each other to stop abusing each other, and stop abusing people of color. And it doesn't matter if you mean to do it or not. Your abuse is abuse.
Exactly. Well,
here we go again, man.
Here we go, man. It's good to be with you, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Thank you.
All right. Peace.
Bye.